Hey guys, welcome to Backstage with PV3. I am so excited as we're in season 2 here with Backstage with PV3. Every week, we're going behind the curtain, backstage, and you're getting to learn about things that a lot of folks don't like to talk about front stage. Like you get to learn the insights, the secrets, the things that are actually working in people as they're using speaking and stages to build their business. Today, I actually believe today's guest that we're going to be bringing to you could speak to all 4 of the areas that we focus on. We focus on making sure that you are world class in communication. Like that's super important to us. We make sure that you have clarity on the problem you want to solve and who you want to serve. We make sure that you have products and services that can transform people's lives. And we make sure that you understand the power of getting on other people's digital and physical stages, but also building your own digital and physical stages. And so every week we have guests that might speak to one of those areas. Some of them are really gifted and talented and doing all 4 areas well. Today's guest is one of those that is doing all 4 areas of those well, like would check the box in 4 areas. And so we're gonna see where this goes, and we're gonna just like we'll choose your own adventure. I don't know if any of y'all read that book growing up, but I loved it because I could always get to the back chapter really fast. But choose your own adventure. We're gonna do that today. But I just want to give a little bio on this, and I'm gonna speak from personal thing here. Back in 2019, I got the chance to spend 2 days with a hero of mine. His name is David Green. And David Green, on April 9th, 2019, I started to realize what a powerful Christian entrepreneur looked like. And I was in a room with people that really lit my soul up on fire. And so one of the things that I did is I left that room. He's the CEO of Hobby Lobby. I left that room and I came back home and I just began to call some friends. And I said, we're supposed to meet every Monday and we're supposed to pray and we're supposed to celebrate of what God is doing in our lives and pray for one another and hold each other accountable and be there for one another. And for 4 years consecutively, I did that with a group of men. Well, this is one of those group of men that I did that with. And not only is he a powerful man of God, he is an incredible husband, incredible father, but he's brilliant. I believe he's a brilliant speaker, a brilliant author, and I believe there's some things that have expanded even past that, that he's grown in as well. But I love his books. I love his most recent book, All Around Goal Setting. I love his book, Soundtrack, all around the different sounds and tracks that you play in your mind that are stopping you from going to new levels. I'm super excited to welcome backstage with us today, guys. Would y'all give just incredible welcome to my friend, Mr. Jon Acuff. Jon, what's up, buddy?
Hey, it's great to see you again. That was quite an intro. There's a lot of pressure. I like the low bar that I can step over. You really, all right, we got to deliver today, Pete. I hope you're ready.
Yeah, let's start by doing the same thing I did with you in Nashville at Donald Miller's house. I've never done this on Backstage with PV3, but I'll have you be our first. Would you just open us up in prayer that today what you and I talk about will truly make an impact on every single person that listens to it? So I don't know. I used to pray with you, man.
Sure.
So I want to let's go back to our old school and maybe open us up in prayer today.
Sure. I'll open us up. Lord, thank you for being wildly generous with gifts. Thank you for being the creator of all wisdom, the creator of all creativity. So my prayer today is that we would just appreciate that generosity and that we would be good stewards of our time and good stewards of our ideas. And that when we have a great idea, we point to the great gift giver, which is you. Amen.
Amen. Well, guys, I'm excited for the gifts that you guys are going to get today. Jon, first off, obviously an intro, but what else would you want people to know about Mr. Jon Acuff today?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered a lot of it. I've got 2, I used to say teenage daughters, one's 20 now. So we're on the edge of empty nest, which we're excited about. It's a new season. So I've got a senior in high school, I've got a sophomore in college. I love writing books and I love speaking. So for me, those are my 2 favorite things to do on the planet. And so that's what I spend the majority of my year doing is curating ideas, figuring out how to share them. I consider myself a handle maker. I put handles on ideas. The world has enough ideas. We have too many ideas. we don't have handles we can use to pick them up and bring them into our lives. So one of the things I do as a speaker is say, how do I put a handle on that idea? One of the worst things you can do as a speaker is say to a crowd, here, you figure out how this is helpful. Like, I love that you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, but if I'm a plumber and there's 1,000 plumbers in the crowd, you better connect how you climbing Mount Kilimanjaro helps me as a plumber on a Tuesday. You better put a handle. You better do the work. That includes speaking and in books. And so I'm always going, how do I put handles on it? So I love conversations like this because I get to geek out with a world-class communicator like yourself and encourage a bunch of other people, because I think it's the best thing in the world. I am thrilled every day that I get to do this.
Dude, I love it. Hey, how many books have you written? I don't even know that.
Number 10 will come out in September. And
Number 10.
Yeah. Number 10, I'm working on number 11 right now. That's what I was doing right before this. And so, like, the reason I wrote All It Takes Is a Goal is the books haven't happened by magic. They haven't happened by accident. I believe in the power of goals. And I talk about that in the book in a way I couldn't talk about it in book one. In book one, I could have said, if you do this, this will happen, because it hadn't happened. But by book 9, I can say, hey, if you try it this way, this happens. Like, I think about this all the time, Pete. I've owned my own business for 10 years. The crazy thing is 13 years ago, somebody could have asked me how to run a business and I would have been tempted to give them advice. And now I have real advice because I've owned a business for a decade. So when somebody asks you a speaking question or like, hey, what does it take to have a great career as a speaker? You're not guessing. You're going, well, I've worked with 1,000. Here's the thread I've seen. I've done my own. And so for me, by the time I'm on book 8, 9, 10, I don't feel like I have to kind of guess what works. I go, oh, you want to do something big? Here's the formula. And this is how it works. And then when you go into it, you go, he's right, this worked. And I go, I know, not just for me, but for thousands of people that have taken the idea before I even put it in a book. Pete, the book is the last thing. The book is you can tell when a book is the first thing because the ideas haven't been tested and you can poke holes in them immediately. For me, I do online coaching, online courses. I'm testing the ideas with thousands of real people. By the time it comes out in a book, it works, not just for like white writers in Nashville. It works for single moms and African-American uncles and, you know, people of all different ages because I've tested it. And that's the value of, you said those 4 things. You can't do any one of them with excellence in isolation. It's a framework. And so that's why it's fun for me to say, you know, be on a show like this, because I use the stuff you teach. That's fun.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to start with a controversial question, and maybe it's not that controversial, but I've learned to add sound bites to this because, you know, that's what I'm, you know, different people. But one of the things that what's not true with you, but I feel like it's true with a lot of authors is like when I read your book, I'm like, oh yeah, Jon talked to us about that. That's how he navigates his soundtracks. Like that's the practice that he's actually doing, or this is the practice he's doing for goals. Most of the books, not most, but there's got to be a high percentage that people who write books, Jon, they've never even done the stuff. And I'm like, dude, I don't like, I'm even talking about stuff with like people who write books like this is how you make your employees happy. And I'm like, dude, I know you don't even have one employee. I feel like I struggle with a lot of authors. I've yet to write a book. I'm going to write a book because there's plenty I've done that I've worked. I love that about you. What you've written, you've actually done or practiced. Why? What do you think about all these books that get written where they have never done that? I wrestle with that.
So here's what I would say. I think that in our culture, there's a lot of people whose influence outpaces their wisdom. Their influence outpaces their experience. Their influence outpaces their intelligence. And so they catch a wave in a thing, and then to maintain the thing, they have to keep feeding the content machine. And so then somebody who doesn't have kids all of a sudden is like, here's how you raise kids. What? Like, no, like, but they feel this pressure of, I got to feed the content machine. So I think that's part of it. I just know for me, Pete, I can tell when the idea has texture. The idea is 3D. You can tell when a book is 2D and you go, this person said something that they've never tried, because if they tried it for a minute, it would fall apart. And so it's technically right. It's not practically right. So I like books that are practically right, which means I'm a dad, I tried this. I'm an entrepreneur. Here's what I learned in 3 years of doing this. And I think this next generation is spotting that stuff faster and dismissing it. I think that younger generations can spot that BS a long way away, and they'll turn you off. They won't listen to your message. And so for me, it's really fun to communicate that way. It takes time. It's messy, but man, like the way I say it, Pete, is you know, sometimes some books are written by somebody's hands. I like the books written by their heart. And you
Mm.
can see a handbook immediately, and it will feel technically right, but you go, this is just a bunch of correct information, but it hasn't been lived, it hasn't been breathed, it hasn't been tried. And I think that's where the people that do that, you get to go, oh, there's something different here. And you might not be able to describe why. That's why you'd go like a guy like Dave Ramsey, he went bankrupt. Like he's
Yeah.
been like like there's a texture there, there's a 3D there. Sean Cannell, like when Sean Cannell tells stories about YouTube, you don't think he's a guy who caught one viral video and then tried to turn it into a career. He's been in the trenches for 10 years. And so I just think, again, it takes longer, but it's worth it. And the other thing is, it doesn't hurt your heart. I think your heart gets wounded when you pretend to be somebody else. It creates, you're playing a character. And eventually, dude, playing a character empties you out. And you're not fun to be around. You might get a bunch of accolades, a bunch of money, but you won't enjoy any of it because you know it's for something that's not true. And that doesn't feel good.
Dude, I love that. I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. I mean, for me, the majority of books I read, actually, I try to avoid those, but I feel like the majority of books that are written are technically correct, but never live. Like a lot of people put out books. I'm looking
Yeah.
at like, and I try to avoid those. I want to know somebody who's actually practiced this, lived it out. It's not just technically.
Dude, the joke I do is I go, if I can still smell sunscreen on you from your honeymoon, don't write a marriage book. Don't write a marriage book yet. If your kid is a year old, don't write a parenting book. You're not even parenting a 1-year-old. You're protecting them. That's all you're doing. Like,
Yeah.
there's no, like, you're protecting them from knives and sharp edges. So, like, that's why I've started to talk more about parenting content now because I have an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. And I, by no means, feel like a parenting expert. Oh my gosh, the amount of mistakes I've made. But I am like, you know what? There's this thing we try. Like, okay, here's an example. So I'll share, like, we have a phrase in our house called real quick. So if one of my teenage daughters is at a party or somewhere and she feels uncomfortable and she doesn't want to do something that people are asking her to do, she texts us and goes, hey, real quick, can I take so-and-so, give them a ride home? Or, hey, real quick, can I extend my curfew? We know that means she wants us to say, no, we need you home right away. She's throwing us under the bus and she gets to go, oh, these parents, oh, they're such jerks. I want to stay at this party. That would be so fun, but look at this text. So it's this little thing. I'll share that because we lived that and it helped us raise teenagers in a safe, practical way. And that's the kind of content I'll share, but I had to live it first.
Yeah, I love it. Dude, let's tackle this. And I've heard different studies. And, you know, I've heard like the second Friday of the month or the third Friday of the month,
Yeah.
or like all these different studies that of when people actually give up on goals. So I believe there's three types of people here today. And I didn't think this coming in. There's the person who feels like very much on track with their goals and they're crushing it, which is by the way, the minority. If we're going to be, if people are
Sure.
really honest, the people listening to this right now. The second group is those that are behind track. And I feel like all year long, I'm like, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. But it's just another way of saying I've given up on it. Although that's not what I'm saying. A lot of times in my mind, I'm not saying I'll give up on it, but I'll get to it. And then there's actually a third type. And if I'm being really real with you today, I'm the third type. I didn't even do anything to prepare for the new year like I normally do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people who haven't done anything thus far, thus far. And I'm stoked about your book, man. All it takes is a goal. If you don't have that, guys, listen to it. We'll drop that in the show notes and go listen to that and go buy it. But I'm just curious, Jon, like what do you say to people right now that are kind of, I'd love for this episode to live evergreen of like, hey,
Sure.
we're past this New Year's Day. Like, I actually hate that day. I don't know why I hate it. It's because it's the day, it's like the one day where we think about things. So I'm just curious of what wisdom you can give us, not only through your research, but also your practice of what we can do from today on.
Yeah. So the big thing, Pete, is to figure out something you enjoy. Like not something you have to fix. A lot of people, they have a broken soundtrack of a goal is a way for me to fix a problem in my life, but that generates shame. and we pull back from things that we feel shame about. So instead, look at it as it's a gift I get to open. It's a gift I get to open. So how do I reframe it so that I'll actually spend time doing it? The second big thing is that I learned that nobody changes just because. I've never met a single person who woke up and said, I'm going to have grit today. I'm going to have discipline. I'm going to have persistence. That's not what happens. What happens is you bump into something you enjoy and you want that thing more than staying the same. You go, so for me, my version of that, when I was in Atlanta, I had a dead end job. I had topped out. I had 2 young kids. We had no money. I had a long commute. I was super busy, and I started to blog. And all of a sudden I went, whoa, wait a second. I can talk to people directly. Well, wait a second. I can write ideas. And that's what changed me. I didn't say, I'm going to watch less TV, or I didn't say, you know what, I'm going to be more disciplined. I said, wow, blogging is really fun. If I got up half an hour earlier before the house was up, I could write more. If I figured out how to watch less TV, I could throw that time towards blogging. So my goal for people is that I want you to find something you love so much it makes Netflix boring. I want you to find something that gives you so much joy it makes Hulu boring. And you go, oh, because then what happens is your hours become like logs and you want to throw them in the fire and make the fire as big as it can be. So Pete, here's a silly goal I'm doing right now, a little game I'm playing with myself. I realized I need more time. I'm busy. Everybody says that because people are busy. And I was taking a lot of flights. And I said one day, I wonder how long it takes the airplane to actually take off from the moment I sit down to when we actually take off. And so I timed it. And I've been doing that for the last year. So these are my list of my 9 flights this year. And I wrote down how much time it took. It took 8 hours. So all I had to do was pay attention. I found 8 hours of free time. Most people are sitting on the plane, scrolling on Instagram, doing nothing. Now before flights, I go, okay, I know on average I have 35 minutes. What do I want to do with that time? Ooh, I want to work on that project. I want to read that book. I want to do that thing that fills me. Ooh, so I found extra time, but it wasn't because I was disciplined. It was because I had a joy that was so big, it pulled it toward it. So what you have to know is that joy leads to discipline. Joy leads to persistence. Joy, I was thinking about this. Let's use a speaking example. So I had a speech recently. They were running about 45 minutes late. And I was the last thing before cocktail hour. And that's the hardest spot to speak.
Yeah.
Everyone there is going, dude, wrap it up. You're standing between them and an old fashioned. And in that moment, I was like, I'm going to kill this. I love this challenge. And so I paid attention because if you find something you love, even the bad flight is okay. Even getting stuck overnight in Milwaukee is okay. If it's not something you enjoy, the smallest inconvenience will shut you down. So if right now somebody's going, I don't have any goals, I can't figure them out, I would say I would pay attention to what you enjoy. Pay attention to what you love versus going, I know I'm supposed to read more, I know I'm supposed to run more or whatever, because you're not going to do that because you don't really enjoy it. And you're doing something that you think you're supposed to do, and you'll inherit it from culture. Culture will say you should do this. So a big part of it is can we find something small you enjoy doing and do it in a small way and grow it over time? You don't have to do it all at once. Can we find something small and then throw some time at it? Because then it's going to become its own fire and start to gather other parts of your life.
Wow. I love that, man. So what would your encouragement be to those 3 buckets of people, Jon? What would your encouragement be to them today?
So if you're killing it, awesome. Keep killing it. I'm a big believer in do a review. If you had a pretty good month, review what worked and add to it. I think that what happens is hustlers, Pete, don't like to review. They just want to go, 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 go. So to a hustler, I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. A half-hour review at the end of the month is worth 10 hours of productivity. So let's pause for a second. I want you to review your goals, what worked, what didn't work. If you're the second group and you're like, I tried and I failed, I would say, well, that's why we have 11 more months. Don't buy the lie of January. January is a great time to do a goal. It's only one of the times. So what happens is I would step into that and go, it's not too late. It's wild. I did a book for teens about mindset. And one of the things that came up was that even an 11-year-old will feel it's too late because our culture says to a teenager, you got to specialize a sport when you're in the womb. By the time you're 1, you have to know it's all tennis, and so 11-year-olds will go, it's too late for me to get into this sport because I should have started playing when I was So I'd say it's not too late. If you failed and you're like, I want to start again, it's not too late. And then to the person that goes, I didn't do anything, I would say give yourself more credit. Because the reality, Pete, is that if you're on this call, you're a high performer. If you're watching this video, you're a high performer. And I know that because low performers don't engage with this content. They have no idea this type of content exists. They don't watch this. They don't take notes. They don't go, hey, I want some nuggets. So automatically you're a high performer. So one, I'd say congratulations. If you're even curious, you're in a great spot. And then I might say, okay, what would it take you to spend 10 minutes and just write down a couple things you'd like to try this year? Big things, small things, medium things. Like I think a little list on a piece of paper, because what I say, Pete, is that paper shrinks fear. Paper shrinks fear. In your head, it's confusing, it's chaotic, it's big. You get a piece of paper, the things you were worried about get a little bit smaller. You start to see what they really are. So I would say piece of paper, 10 minutes, couple of goals, and that's enough to start.
Wow. I'm just curious because I know you probably have a framework for this or a thought process of this. How many goals do you have in your life in any given time, or as you're starting a new year? Is there any reason or rhyme or reason to why that is?
The answer, I get this question a lot, and people say, how many goals can you work on at the same time? They want me to say 4.7 or 3.8. The reality is as many as you can do successfully. As many as you can do successfully. So I'll always encourage people, Pete, the problem, and I talk about this in the book, is that we go high performers, and everybody on here is a high performer. They rotate between 3 performance zones. The comfort zone, everybody knows that one. It's the pajama pants zone. No goals, no actions, no progress. You're stuck, you're in a funk, you're in a rut. But then the one that's really dangerous for the people that are watching this right now is actually the chaos zone, where you go all the way over and go, okay, I'm going to do 50 goals. I got inspired. I heard an Eminem song, Mom Spaghetti. I saw a video online. I'm like, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to date my spouse. And you try everything, and that's the chaos zone. It's the monster energy zone. That's why we have a phrase in our country, Pete, called a yo-yo diet, because people yo-yo between 2 different zones, the comfort zone and the chaos zone. In the middle of those is the potential zone, where you do the right goals at the right pace and get the right progress. So it's different for every person. So if somebody said to me, okay, Jon, I've tried 2 or 3 goals successfully, I'd like to add a 4th, I'd go, awesome, let's add that 4th. But if somebody said to me, what usually happens, Pete, is somebody will show me their list of goals. Like, I'll give you an example. That this happened the other day. A sales director said, I want to do 100 cold calls a week. I was like, that's amazing. Let's go. I said, how many are you doing right now? Like the last couple of weeks? He said 20. I said, okay, so you're going to 5 times it. I said, how long will it take you to do those 100 sales calls? He said, about 20 hours. I said, how much free time do you have in your week right now? He said, free time? I don't have any free time. And I said, well, your goal is going to fail. You're going to try to fit a 20-hour goal into a week that has 0 hours available. Of course it's going to fail. So for some people, I'd go, how much time do you have to play with? And if you told me, you know what, I bet with some moving some things around, I'd have 2 hours a day or 5 hours a week. Then I'd go, let's plug some goals into that. Like, let's plug 2, let's plug 5, like, let's plug them. And then the last thing I'd say is I like a lot of goals if they're not competing goals. I'll give you an example. If you told me my 2 goals this year are to do 200 events on the road as a speaker and be a better father or husband and around with my kids all the time, I go, oh, dude, those are competing goals. They're going to argue with each other. But an example of goals that don't compete is if you say, I want to listen to more audiobooks this year and I want to walk more. I'm using walking to get in shape. I go, those overlap. Let's do it. Listen to audiobooks while you're walking. Like, let's go. Those are great overlap. So if you want to overlap a bunch of goals, amen, dude. But the competing goals is where people get in trouble. And then the second area is when they have 20 hours of goals and 1 hour of free time. And then they go, it's so weird. I couldn't do my goals. I was so optimistic. Like, I felt passionate. Doesn't matter. If your desire is divorced from your calendar, you're doomed. If your desire is divorced from your calendar, you're doomed. Your heart will say one thing, your calendar tells the truth. Your heart says one thing, your calendar tells the truth. So that's what I'd say to those 3 groups.
Dude, I love that. I love that. So I'm going to ask you a question. Because that's helpful. I wrote, I'm taking a ton of notes here today. As many as you can do successfully, like as many as you can
Yeah.
do successfully. Overlapping goals are greater than competing goals. Do you find yourself in comfort zone, chaos zone, or the potential zone? Like we need to live in the potential zone. So with that said, what have you found for Jon, what that number is? Like, does Jon?
Yeah. Here's what I'd say, Pete. What I've learned is that new seasons need new scorecards, and that's a powerful principle. So what happens often with people is they'll go, "Yeah, I was killing it as a real estate agent, and then I've really dropped my goals." And I'll go, "Well, tell me about the rest of your life." And I go, "Well, I'm taking care of a dad who's got early onset dementia." And I go, "Well, how many hours does that take?" And I go, "Like 20 hours a week, and I'm always kind of on call." And I go, "Did you adjust your goals at all?" And I go, "No." And it's so
Hmm.
unfair to not adjust. Like we get locked in and we get legalistic. That's the thing. People get legalistic with their goals and they become really rigid, and rigid goals are fragile goals. Rigid goals are fragile goals. You get stuck in perfectionism, you get stuck in legalism, you start to go, does this count? Does this not count? And so a big part of it is having flexibility. So in the season I'm in right now, I know the amount of goals I can do, but you're always adjusting. You're always going, okay, I pushed it to my top ability and I went one click too far and I got really tired and I had to take 3 days off. And I want to figure out what's sustainable. Like my goal isn't a lot of sprints. I think a lot of people that are in my industry do kind of intense sprints and they go like, you got to go all the time. You got to go hard all the time. And I'm much more interested in like, what's a sustainable? I don't get excited anymore by somebody who's done something for a year or 2 years. What gets me excited now is when I go, Craig Groeschel has been living at a level that's very high performing for a very long time. He's got a family who loves him and kids who loves him and a wife who loves him and he at church and he's doing global leadership summit. What's he doing? What's he doing? Because we're looking at a 20-year run right now, and I think there's 20 other years ahead. Those are the people that I kind of study, that I try to be. So for me, when it goes one notch too high or maybe 10 notches, if it's a really busy season, that's where I have to pull back. And it takes humility to admit limits. It takes humility to go, I can't do that with excellence. I can do these four things. And this is my field. And I'm not, the fool chases fantasies. He who works his land will have abundance. This is my land. Like, this is so like, Pete, for me, my podcast isn't big. I'll give you that right now. Like, my podcast isn't big. And I'm okay with that because I need my books to be excellent. And the people that I know who have big podcasts don't write books. And so it would be very immature and egotistical of me to go, I could have a huge podcast empire and also a really well-written book at the same time. Right now, I can't. That's a limit for me. So I have a podcast. I do the best with the amount of time I give it, but I also can't look at somebody else's podcast and go, man, their podcast, like Tim Ferriss is killing it or whatever it is, because he's not writing books right now. And so like, amen. And he works really hard at that. And I know he puts a ton in that podcast. I don't have a ton to give to that. My book is what needs to get a ton. And so I have to every day turn down opportunities that are distractions in order to live at my sustainable definition of success.
Around the two things that you started with saying are the most important are your speaking and your writing. Like speaking and your writing, like those two things. How do you balance the speaking? Let's go there for a minute, because you do have a family, you do have kids. Jon's a well-paid keynote. Jon, what's your kind of going keynote rate right now?
40K.
So Jon's part of the 1 to 2%. Like I say that 99% of people will never get over $25,000. Like, of all people who go and speak, like I've surveyed and like I've had thousands in workshops, and it's like 1 to 2% ever make it above 25K. So I have the data on that. So Jon is part of that. Like Jon's part of that. So how do you balance that, Jon? Because that can be a lot of time on the road.
Well, I mean, at that level, you're not doing 1,000 events. Like you're small, like the client pool is smaller naturally. So that's one. Two, I did 50 events last year. That was a good number. I can do about 50 is a good sweet spot for me. And then the other thing is my travel is kind of SWAT team travel. I'm in and out. So like it's one night. So the people that I have a lot of empathy for are the consultant, like the consultant that's doing a Monday through Thursday at a Ramada for like 4 months in a row in Oklahoma. Like that person, I go, man, that's really tough travel. my wife always jokes. She's like, "Where did you stay last night? Like in your one night?" I was like, "Oh, I was at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs." She's like, "Oh, boo hoo, the Broadmoor!" Like,
Yeah.
dude, you're like. So I try to keep a really. So one, it's less than people think. I say no, but my price says a lot of no's. Like I get a lot of like people fill out my request form on my website, and my price filters like, and it should like because I'm trying to serve a certain type of client in a certain type of way. So like for me, the price helps a lot with the filter. And then like an example, I don't speak in July. So I don't, the entire month of July, I take off with my family. And this will be our third year we've done that. And that's been a really healthy rhythm. And it's also a month where there's not a ton of speaking for me anyway. So I don't want to pat myself on the back. Like taking off October would be harder because October is a busy month. But the travel for me really hasn't been that much of an issue. The harder thing to create time for is writing. Writing books takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of headspace. That's harder for me. I have to say no to chaos a lot in order to write. That's the harder thing for me.
Yeah, I love that. Jon, I love that. How many books have you sold?
I think we're at like 920 right now.
Dude,
Yeah.
of all books?
Yeah, total books. Yeah, total.
Dude, that's awesome. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So I don't know this for a fact to the people who are listening to it, but the people who are listening, I want to know, like, did you know Jon Acuff's name before coming to today and hearing this today? Like, and the reason I asked that is my assumption is going to be it's a lot of no's, Jon. Like,
Yeah, dude, totally. Yeah.
But I want to
Yeah.
go somewhere with that. I want to go somewhere with that. I knew you. I read your stuff, but and I know people are probably amazed and blown away as they're listening. But you've sold close to 1 million books. You're a $40,000 keynote. That's not BS. That's like legit, guys. Like legit. What about the person? Because listen, when I speak, my stage has to have a certain value or I don't speak.
Sure.
Now,
Yeah.
is that in keynotes? Is that in customers that will come? Because of having 4 kiddos, and my kiddos are now, I'm starting to coach. Dude, one of the huge things for me is what did you say? New seasons equal or new
New
seasons?
seasons deserve new scorecards.
Yeah. So like I'm coaching my son's tennis team now. So, and I don't take that in the equation. Like that's a chunk of time that
Yeah,
I
of course.
longer have. Like I
Yeah.
don't have that
Yeah.
time anymore.
Yeah.
So like I don't usually connect that back to my goals. My goals don't change. And I hope you guys hear that. Say it one more time, Jon. New seasons, new
New
scorecard.
seasons deserve new scorecards. And I think we have a really hard time with that, recognizing that we're in a new season. And I think you need to give yourself lots of grace and adjust it. The problem is we'll remember a great year we had. We had an amazing year 4 years ago. Like we are crushing it, and we won't take into account we weren't married, we were single, or we lived in a different community, or we had a job that was really easy to do, so it left tons of headspace on the weekends. And then we're in a stressful job, we've got a family, we've got like that's why like for me, you have to look at your whole life and go, what season am I in? And let me just say to the people, like I think it's interesting to ask, like, have you heard of Jon? I think everyone needs to embrace a gift. And what I call it is the gift of invisibility. And it's a gift that most of us don't want, but most of us have. And what I mean by that is it's a real gift to make your mistakes when no one is watching. It's a real gift to try things when no one is watching. It's a real gift. And so develop your stuff, develop your content, develop your talent as you grow. We like Pete, I know. So like at GLS, I spoke at Global Leadership Summit in 2022, and it was amazing. It went so well. And now I wanted to do that 10 years earlier. I desired that. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. And if I had been given that stage early, I wouldn't have made the most of it because I didn't have the content. I didn't have the chops. I didn't know how to work a room of 5,000 people. So if you had asked me 10 years ago, are you ready for GLS? I was like, let's go. Let's do it right now. But the reality was I needed that gift of invisibility. And so anytime that somebody goes, I've never heard of you, one, I'm like, I still got that gift. Cool. I can try things. Two, I like the challenge. Bill Burr, let's talk speaking. Bill Burr, the comedian, said, there's home games and an away game. When you sell tickets to your own show, that's a home game. People are going to give you free laughs. They're going to go along with you. It's going to be warm from an instant. When you go somewhere and they've never heard of you, that's an away game. You got to work. Dude, 99% of my events are away games. Like I step into a room, it's 3,000 optometrists who have never heard of me. And I go, let's go. I love that challenge. Like I write a specific joke for optometrists that kills that room, that would bomb in every other room. Bomb in every other room. I love that challenge. I'm an away game. So what happens is when I do get a home game, like, oh, I've been playing away all season, and that home game is amazing. But I'm an away game guy, so I take the challenge of invisibility. I take the challenge of an away game, and I go, that's just making me better at the craft. Like, I want to be great at the craft. And so 10 years from now, I want to be in an even better spot, but I got to keep putting in the work.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question along speaking before we'll go a few more minutes here. I want to ask you a question around speaking. So the reason I brought up like probably a lot of people don't know you, and I'm just assuming that, but I also know that you're part of the 1 or 2 percentile that's at $40,000 keynote fee. And I'm a big believer in the value of the stage. Sometimes people don't think keynote fee matters. It does matter. But I want people to make sure that the value of their stage is significant. And so when you get to a point of $40,000, that's a significant value of a stage. Like, that's an awesome value. And I'm sure plenty comes more speaking, more clients, more members of your community, your goal community, which I'll share with everybody in a little bit. But the power of that is awesome. And so I gotta believe what's going through our listeners' mind is, okay, if Jon got from 0 to 40,000, I think I can. And guys, Jon is a world-class communicator. I know you guys are like, oh my God, probably dropping bombs on what he's saying, like mic dropping so many nuggets. I've already got a page of notes here. Jon, I'm going to ask you for the less than 5-minute path of what you would say to somebody who's not making anything, or maybe they're making a little bit in the speaking business. How do they begin to evolve to 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, up until the point of where you're at, because that's where you've gotten to? What would be your like playbook, framework, roadmap that you would share with the listeners?
Yeah. So about, I recently found an invoice from 10 years ago, and it was for $800 to fly from Atlanta to San Diego and speak twice. And I was thrilled. I was like, somebody's paying me to do something I love. So the first thing is, you got to love it. Like, you got to love it. You got to love it. You got to love it. And that's so cliche, but I really do believe it. So I think there's things you can do over time to raise that. Think of it as a ladder. It's a ladder you're climbing. And if your ladder only has 2 rungs, you can't climb that ladder. So you want to have lots of rungs. So for me, it was, okay, I'm going to start at 500. I'm going to start at 1,000. One of the best questions, if you're not getting paid right now, that you can ask when somebody asks you to speak is, what's your budget? What's your budget? They might say a number higher than the one you were expecting because it's easy to be insecure and undervalue your work. So I started early going, well, what's your budget? What's your budget? What's your, and so I started at low fee. And then I started to learn that some numbers are similar. So $5,000 is not that different from $6,000 to a client. So like, you start to notice there's cousin numbers. So I didn't jump from 5 to 15. Whoa, that's a big gap. I worked my way up that ladder and would go, okay, if 5 is acceptable, I bet 7,500 is too. Like, can I? And then I started to figure out, okay, how do I add more and more value? Like, how do I, make it a great deal for them? So like, I'm really deliberate in my, I was thinking about this just the other day. A client said, would you be on our podcast? And I was like, oh, I got to add that to my stuff. I'll be on every podcast a client wants me to be on. Like, that's another way for me to serve them. So what you learned is that there's some speakers who are difficult to work with. They have a lot of demands. They're kind of dismissive to the client. They won't do a pre-call. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, I'm there to serve you. A silly thing I say sometimes is, I don't like the voicemail that says, voicemail message where somebody goes, for the fastest way to get a hold of me, text me. Because what you're saying is, I'm not going to listen to your voicemail. If a client wants to send me a dove like Prince, by all means, I'm here to serve. Whether you want to leave me a voicemail, a text mail, whatever. So my attitude, what helped me climb the ladder even faster was, it changed from I'm here to perform to I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve that client. I'm here to serve that client. So I made a deliberate list of questions that I'd ask people. I would start to, be deliberate about gifts, even stuff like this, Pete. So like, and this is why we could talk about this for 10 hours, because it's my favorite thing. Dude, like 4 years ago, I was giving clients this bag I like. I have this briefcase I like. I was giving it out. And I gave it to this one woman who had booked me to speak. And like 2 years later, I go and do the same event. And this guy working the soundboard has that bag. And I'm like, oh, it's so weird. I have that bag too. He goes, yeah, my boss gave it to me. Some guy gave it to her. She didn't want it. And he was talking about me. Now, my mistake was the idea that I could buy a woman a bag. I can't buy my wife a bag. I know her pretty well. The absurdity of going, I like this bag. I'm a guy. Here's a bag. That wasn't personal. That wasn't great service. So now what I do is little things like, hey, what do you love to do for fun? Hey, and I'm starting conversations when I'm on site before I get there. Dude, I gave a guy a Eric Davis rookie card because he grew up loving the Cincinnati Reds. And a buddy a year later spoke at that same event and was like, that dude just mentioned the Eric Davis rookie card. Like, dude, that was fun for me. And no other speaker's doing that. Like, nobody. Now, John Rulin, obviously, he's written a book on it. Like, I don't want to, like, I am a rookie compared to, like, there's a lot of people that are great at that, but I'm learning. So for me, it was, that's a rung on the ladder where I'm adding more value. And a ladder is easy to climb when the rungs are 3 inches apart. They're really hard to climb when there's only like, I'm at 5, I want to be at 15. Like, dude, you got to really stretch. So I'm trying to add rungs.
Dude, that's incredible. Like, you need to be thinking about, maybe we need to do some follow-up, but you need to be thinking about what that ladder is. Cause I'm thinking about the ladder too. Like, what are the rungs that help you get to bigger and bigger keynotes? Like, I think that would be an incredible.
Well, it's relationships. It's relationships. It's trailers. It's a book. It's, doing a course with Pete. Like, there's all these things that are on there, and that you go, okay, I'm climbing these, it's starting a podcast to interview people who might not take your call so that they can know you're normal and smart and interesting, and going, okay, I want to be at these 5 events. I'm going to start a leadership podcast because I need to target these 5 people. I want them to, like, because friends hire friends. Like, dude, that's just the reality. Friends hire friends. And there's a ton of speakers, like, you would put me in front of an audience now in a different way than if you had just seen a book, because you asked me to pray at the Donald Miller thing because, like, I'm not going to go off on some weird tangent. I'm not going to try to show off in the prayer. Like, you knew I wasn't going to try to monetize the prayer. Like, whatever. You're like, oh, he's a friend. I can trust what he's going to do. So even going to become friends with people is another one of those rungs. So yeah, it's a really fun ladder if you think about it the right way.
I made one of the biggest mistakes, and Jon just has made me aware of it, and he didn't even know it indirectly. There was a client of ours that we worked with that he wanted to have all of his curriculum in K through 12 athletic programs. Mm-hmm. And the number one way that he did that is he started a podcast, and all he did was interview athletic directors, and they connected with him in such a meaningful way. Like, I don't even know if there were listeners to the podcast. Like, they might have been the only listeners to the podcast, but they don't know that because those aren't public numbers.
No.
So they see this athletic director highlighted, and now all of a sudden he's landing the business. Like Jon just stated that. One of the biggest mistakes I probably have made is I used to interview meeting planners or people who control stages every single week, and they loved it. And now it made it easy for me or our clients to get onto their stages because they built a connection with me. And for some reason, I got lazy and I stopped that. So it's something that I've got to go back and say, like, if I really want to be able to put my clients on a lot of stages and me get on the stages I want, it might make sense to reintroduce it, Jon. I don't know if that lands for you.
I love that, dude. I love that. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. Well, for me, my version of that would be, if I'm on LinkedIn, could I do some content that has empathy for event planners? So I know, like, at this point, I know the challenges, and I can speak to them and go, like, hey, as a speaker, like, one of the things I'll say to an event planner is, hey, you'll have my slides 3 weeks before the event, because I know one of the things you hate is when a speaker shows up with a thumb drive and goes, it's built in a program a Russian teenager created, redesign it as I take the stage, please. They hate that. Like, they're nervous enough. They want to know, like, one of the things I do is I'll text the night, like, if I say I'm speaking Wednesday and I get there Thursday, I text the event planner, go, hey, just got here. I'm at the hotel. Everything's great. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Just confirming. I'll be there at 8 a.m. for the sound check. That's one less thing they have to think about versus going, I'm here as the talent. Serve me. Like, dude, like, that kind of stuff, you can pull it off for a period, but it's a small world and people talk. And so, like, and they tell me stories. Like, I know a speaker, his demand, like, he wanted a baby grand piano in the green room so he could relax himself before the speech. Like he wasn't even going to play it on stage. He just, and so then some poor event planner has to be like, where am I finding a baby grand piano? And so like, I'm like, if that dude's doing that, I'll be fine. There's going to be plenty of business.
No, I love that, man. I love that. Hey, any big goals that you have around the place where you want to see your speaker fees get to, John?
Yeah, I'd love to hit 100. I'd love to hit 100.
That's the number that popped up for me.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to develop more fame to get there. Like that's just one of the ladder rungs, if you will. Is I'll have to. I need a book to hit, which is part of why like I've never had a book that just took off. Like I've had books sell 200,000 copies. Amazing. I'm so grateful for that. This is not like that. I'm not grateful. I just mean I haven't had a million seller that was like blew up. So I've been much more of a okay. You don't know what's gonna hit, but you do know nothing will if you don't have products in it. So like I try to write the best books I can write. And one of my words is prolific. I want to be prolific. Like this is a gift to get to do this for an hour, never mind for 10 years. I want to do it for 20 more years. I'm going to try to be prolific and maybe book 14 will pop up and it'll catch a cultural wave. Maybe book 17. I don't know. I can't rely on that. So I'm going to keep creating content.
I love that. And I actually think you're right. And I think people who tell you otherwise are not telling you the truth. There is a threshold. I don't know if it's 50. I don't know if it's 75, but I've spoken to event planners for 20 years.
Yeah.
I've personally booked 20,000 stages in my career. Like I'm talking education, corporate, nonprofit, association, it doesn't matter. And I know that when they tell me you get to that 75 or 100 mark, the rung legitimately is more fame or your name can add more, will get more people into the seat. So it's
not the quality of the speech.
No, it's not, bro.
Dude, I know. And that's just the reality. There's no grumpiness about that. That like, if you win the Super Bowl, you could get 150 and do a Q&A. Like no prep. You sit fireside chat and they go, hey, tell us about throwing touchdowns in the Super Bowl. Now that person has spent 20 years honing a different craft that they've earned the right to talk about that. So I don't look at that and go, oh man, I can't believe they get 150. I totally understand that. Like they're playing at a level and doing something that's very popular and then everybody in the audience gets to go, they had so-and-so at the event. Like I am very aware that I think when people leave my events, they go, man, that was really awesome. And it really inspired me. I'm going to think about my soundtracks differently. I genuinely believe it can change their life. But I know when they go to their bar with their friends the next week, they don't go, dude, we had Jon Acuff at our event. And their friends go, get out of here. Jon Acuff? What was he even doing in town? Like in the same way you asked today, have you heard of Jon Acuff? And the majority of people said no. It would be so immature for me to be upset about that, for me to go, it's not unfair. Like you can't blame that, but you can 100% go, if I wanted to get to 100, I need to think about fame and the level I can handle. Cause I don't know, like maybe there's a limit to that. Like maybe it's not worth the thing. I don't know. But you should at least read the room and understand I'm a guy, I get booked often with celebrities and I'm the content guy and I love I write books because I love that. So again, like I love where I'm at, but if I said, man, it'd be cool to get to 100, how do I get there? I think fame is one of the rungs.
Yeah, and I think it's probably because, guys, my biggest keynote speaker that I've ever booked was Tom Brady, and I will tell you he was not $150,000. So I'll make that note. He was a whole lot more than that. And then gave the option to. Well, anyways, we won't get into.
He moved tickets too, though. Like people there's tons of value. So I'm not trying to criticize celebrities. There's a ton of value they add that I don't.
Most of them, I'm not saying all of them, most of them are just doing it for the paycheck, by the way. I have 20 years of doing this. Most of them stink, are not good, don't necessarily care. And then there are some of them that I've had an experience that are really good. And I got to say, like in terms of Tom Brady, it was the second loudest decimeter in the room of the weekend. But John, you might be surprised at what number one was the finals of the Great American Speak Off that we did.
Ah, nice.
It was the loudest that the room got because there were these three people that nobody knew in the room, but
Yeah.
they were cheering for because they could see themselves
Yeah.
in those people
Yeah.
more than they could see themselves in Tom Brady. It was the loudest peak
Yeah.
of the room, dude.
I
Loud.
love it. I love it.
But it's that whole point that people resonate with that. Like people are resonating with you today because they're like, oh my God, Jon's got the 40. I can get the 40. You know, and I want to tell you guys, I believe around the 50 mark to 70 mark, it's something famous has got to pop. A lot of
Yeah.
books, or you're on a reality
Yeah.
show, or you're a professional athlete, or you had several videos go viral. So I want people that, like, Jon is beginning to press. It's probably that range, right, Jon? 50 to
Yeah.
70 fame
Yeah.
stuff.
And the thing you have to remember too is that has a shelf life. So if
Sure.
you're on so like you got a window, you better work that window. My hope is that if you climb the ladder as a content person and you climb the ladder as a craft person, that's a long-term sustainable thing. Like because I haven't had a thing that popped off and then cooled, it's just been day by day. It's just been step by step. And so, yeah, I hope that is an encouragement because it is like I'm practicing the speeches. I'm listening to the client. I'm adding jokes. I'm figuring out, wow, that didn't go well. How do I do this next time that I want it to go a little bit differently? And I'm still a student of the game. And that's why, again, when Pete and I talk about this stuff, it's fun because I feel like it's two guys that love the craft of what it is. And when you're around those people, you can feel it and it's exciting. It's encouraging to encourage other people to get into it. Because again, I think it's the best industry in the world.
Jon, one of the things I don't feel called to, like a lot of people, is all of this content that has to be created in order to be viral or build your social media, because I've got my other things that I'm committed to.
Sure.
And so this is the piece where I'm like, team, my shorts, my sound bites, my podcast, my YouTube channel, it's coming from this because I don't have the time that, some of these people are committing to content at a massive level. So anyways, I loved it, man. It was great being with you today. Hey, any feedback on end of the month review? Any feedback on that, Jon? How you review a month?
How me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I posted it today. I have it on my phone. I sent it to a buddy. So I've got a goal buddy we meet every 2 weeks. So I've got accountability. So real human, like it's crazy. They're everywhere. They're available. So I sent him the recap. So I sent him some numbers. So the numbers I sent him were books I read. I read 10 books this month. One of my goals is to read 100 a year. I don't believe in writer's block. I believe in idea bankruptcy. If you can't write, it means you haven't been feeding yourself enough ideas. I never sit down with a blank piece of paper. I always bring ideas. So 10 books read in January. I walked 40.9 miles. I want to walk 450 miles this year. I ran 49.4. I'm trying to get to 650 this year. Did CrossFit 13 times. Did morning pages every day for the month of January. Julie Cameron wrote a book called The Artist's Way. She encourages you to do 3 handwritten pages every morning. I've been doing that as a creative exercise. It's been great. Spent 31 hours outside. There's a woman named Jenny Urich who has a brilliant business called 1,000 Hours Outside. She realized she was feeling stuck as a parent and not connecting with her kids. And so she's got this massive movement called 1,000 Hours Outside. And then I did my email plan 24 days in a row. I'm trying email in a different way. And then I did 135 total goal hours. So for me, I want to be able to look at it by the numbers, not just feelings. Feelings are important, definitely. But when I'm doing a review, I want data. Like data, what I say about data is data kills denial, which prevents disaster. Data kills denial, which prevents disaster. It'd be easy for me to have a feeling about how a month went, and fear gets in there, and doubt gets in there, and insecurity gets in there. But I'm going to pause and go, what's the data telling me? Because the data is just telling me the truth. It's not emotional. It's just going, hey, you did these 3 things. You reached out to these 5 people. All right, great. That was a good number. I want to reach out to 7 next month. So I'm a big kind of data nerd that way. That's how I do a year in review or a month in review, is like, what are my numbers telling me? Yeah. And if you keep numbers, the last 4 or 5 days of the month, you have great incentive to hustle. Like you'll go, I want to get a couple in. Guess what I was doing yesterday? Spending time outside. Because I was like, oh, I didn't get enough outside time. So it gives you different points during the month. Same with sales teams. Pete, you've worked with sales teams. Guess when they close a lot of deals? At the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, because they're like, oh, I can see that finish line. Do the same thing with yourself.
Yeah. John, do you just track that on your phone? Like, do you just go outside and start pushing time on your phone? Or like, how are you keeping
No,
that?
dude. So she has an app because again, she's brilliant. She has an app called 1,000 Hours Outside. Dude, another app I'm doing, like this is so dorky, but let's just be dorky. There's an app called Fantasy Hike, and it tracks your walking towards Mordor to throw the ring back into Mordor like Lord of the Rings. And it's brilliant. And so like it tells you like, oh, hey, you're in this part of the journey. Like that is the dorkiest thing ever. Does it give me a little bit of delight and does it move me along? Of course it does. So some I am tracking on paper, like I showed you, like I've always got like charts I'm working on that I do hand drawn and I enjoy that. But some like I've been tracking wisdom hours, like how many hours I've been invested in wisdom since last July. And so, because I realized wisdom's priceless and I wasn't paying a price for it anywhere. So I was like, let me go put some time against wisdom. And can I get smarter? Can I be more connected to God, more connected to my family, not accidentally, but on purpose? So like some I'm keeping by hand, some are Strava, some are Goodreads. Like I'll use an app if the app is helpful to me. I won't use the app if it's too immersive and I spend more time updating. You should never spend more time updating your goal than actually doing your goal. Wow. So like if you are color coding a bullet journal with pins from Japan and it's taking you an hour to update it and you're not actually doing the thing you want to do, you've moved into perfectionism, you've moved into distraction.
Is there an app or two that you love that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I love Strava. I love the Fantasy Hike app. I love 1,000 Hours Outside. That's been a really good one. And then the one that I'm really enjoying right now is Forest. I don't know if you guys have tried Forest. Forest, you grow little trees based on time. So like it's silly, but it's like, here's my little trees have been growing this week, because of my focused time. So the whole concept is when you need to focus on, I'm very distracted. So when I need to focus on writing, I go into Forest and I go, I'm going to spend an hour on this idea, and I click it and a tree grows. And if I go look at other stuff on my phone, it can die. And so that's another one of the things. What I learned, I mentioned Craig Rochelle. I had him on my podcast the other day. We talked about how many little games and goals he does to stay high performing. When you get around people that are performing at a level you want to get to, they always have little tricks they're doing, little games they're playing, little forms of motivation. Like me writing down how long the plane took to take off. Like that's a silly little thing, but it's not silly if I write a chapter on a plane because I found an extra hour. Like I'm more than willing to do something weird if it works.
That's funny because in my mind, my plane time is when I clear my email inbox. I know that when I have a flight,
perfect,
I can clear it's almost default reading or email inbox.
Yeah,
period.
Perfect. But you're using it. It's not accidental.
Yeah. It's not accidental at all, bro. It's like that's and unfortunately that might mean if I haven't been flying, I haven't been on the road in 6 weeks. So my email inbox is
totally. Next flight's gonna be rough.
Yeah. Dude, I love that, man. I love getting to hang. I know we haven't been able to hang a lot lately, but I love all the time we get together, man. It's
totally super fun. Super fun.
Super fun. So I want to see that assessment that you're going to start giving to clients.
Dude, that's so good, dude. It's so good. I'm already like, I got to talk to the team. Like and it's so like, now I'm like, I could have been doing that for years. You can't get stuck on, I should have, you got to just go forward. So I'm like, all right, how am I going to use it going forward? That's good, dude.
Watch what it does to your email list, but also watch what it does to the customer experience afterwards. They're going to be like, oh my God, you did all of that work. No, the assessment did all that work.
Yeah, it's so good, dude. It's so good. So good. Yeah, I'm already thinking about clients that I'm going to do it with. It's so good.
Yeah, I'm going to have you give your final thoughts here. And maybe you do this. I'm going to see if you do this because we've seen it. Do you have any type of assessment that you'll have your clients have their people take ahead of time?
No.
Jon, one of the greatest adds to your rung is to create an assessment that they have their attendees take ahead of time. So guess what's happening?
Dude, that's good.
Watch this, but you give them a comp code. So like go sell some to your community first. Go sell it to your
Yeah.
community for $10 or $20. And it's going to assess like their goal setting or their soundtracks or something around your keynote talk. Make sure they assess it. Give them a comp code that you can use, that they can use for all of their attendees, and ask them to send it out, because you're going to customize the talk based on their assessments. And so
Dude,
John, right out of the gate,
that's so good.
you can show a
Yeah.
slide to say,
Yeah.
this is what you guys told me. So I'm not going to spend any time on this thing where you feel like you're excelling. I'm going to spend it on these. Now, you might still tackle that thing, but
Yeah.
bro, one of the most powerful things you can do is give them assessment and give them the resources to be able to get it out to their people.
Yeah.
What's your win is you're capturing all of these names of all of these people before you ever get on site. Their win is they're getting something for free because you've given them a comp code, but you're going to build it into your keynote, which makes the audience fall in love with you, because you're not telling them this thing. You know them. You have the data behind you to show them that you know them. So just
Dude, that's so good. So good. Yeah. That is so good. I will 100% do that. That's so good.
Bro, you have all of the content to be able to do that, but that's just a little piece that I'd love to give you. John, final thoughts. I know we've talked about why we have some book authors that suck in this world. No, I'm joking. That actually don't. We've talked about books. We've talked about goals. We've talked about speaking, specifically how to advance in your keynote fee. It's been rich, bro. Any final thoughts that you would have to people? And where can they find you? Tell me where they can find you. Especially, you have one of the best goals community that exists. So please tell them where they can find you, but your final thoughts after you tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, so just jonacuff.com, jonacuff.com. My goals community is jonacuff.com/goals. I have a podcast called All It Takes Is a Goal. And the most recent book is this one, and I read the audio. And there's 10 bonus stories in it. There's a tip. If you get to read your own audiobook, add bonus stories, because people will buy multiple copies of what you do if there's value. So I started kind of riffing on a previous book, and then I was like, no, this needs to be something I add a lot of quality to. So there's 10 bonus stories. It's super fun. The last thing I'd say, one of the things I say a lot of soundtrack, I'll leave you guys with a soundtrack, is fear gets a voice, not a vote. Fear gets a voice, not a vote. And what does it mean? I don't like when people say you should be fearless, because I think it means you're stuck. Every time when I spoke to 10 people, I had 10 person-sized fear, but I worked on it and I did it and I got over it. But then I spoke to 100 people. Guess what happened? I had 100 person-sized fear. But then I worked on it and I did it. Then I had 1,000 person and 10,000. At every new level, there's new fears. That's not failure. That's how you're supposed to feel things. You listen to it, you learn from it. You can't be fully self-aware if you ignore fear. Fear is an early indication system. It gets a voice, but it doesn't get a vote. And what I mean by that is it doesn't get to sit at the head of the table and say, you don't get to write a book. You don't get to be a speaker. You don't get to grow your business. You don't get to reach out to that person. So give it a voice, but just not a vote. And so that's the last thing I'd leave you with.
Dude, that's it. That's awesome. John, thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, super fun.
And listen, I'm going to treat this like our old pods. John used to open and then I used to close, or vice versa.
Yeah, so let's go.
Father God, thank you for this time. Thank you for your gift and your wisdom and your discernment that we have access to every single day when we just take some time to slow down and listen. I just thank you for the wisdom that John has given to us. I thank you that we can see ourselves in him. The guy is full of wisdom and richness. So there is nothing wrong with saying, oh, he's not known. He's very much known in the circles he runs, and it's because of the commitment to his craft. And so would you help us to be committed to the craft that you have put in our hearts? It's one thing to listen, and then it's another thing to go and do. So let us be great listeners to your voice, and let us be great doers, because that's when things begin to build. Consistency creates that, Lord God. And so we just thank you for this time. In your name we pray. Amen. John, thank you, man. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, totally. Good stuff.
All right.
Thanks, guys.